Will, Unreasonable Hospitality, congratulations on the success of this book. You are a restaurateur.
Yes.
How did a restaurateur write such a well-written book? And I'm deeply curious about this because it took me so long to be able to write well. And when somebody who has spent their life becoming great at something and then just pushes out a really well-written book, it makes me angry.
Well, one day I hope to write as well as you, first of all.
That is BS because you are a better writer than me, and everybody on my staff would say that.
I wrote the book because of Simon Sinek, who I become really good friends with. And I did a talk at this thing he did, and he said, you got to write a book. And I still owned restaurants. I was like, I'm too busy to write a book. But after COVID, when I'd sold my restaurants, I wrote it. And here's the thing about writing, and I think this is extraordinary advice for anyone who's a first-time writer and wants to take a pass at it. You know, you've seen the movie or the scene in all the movies where someone sits down to write and they keep on retyping the first line of the book and deleting it. It's overwhelming to be looking at a blank page. And I think so much of writing anything is getting to the point where you have an outline. And there's a sense of comfort that comes from having gotten that far.
Just knowing where you're going to go.
Yeah, knowing more or less the structure. And then the words come much more easily.
Yeah.
Simon had me buy a stack of index cards and carry it around with me for a few months. And every time I had an idea of either a story or a lesson that I wanted to put in the book, I'd just write a few words to remind myself of that story or lesson and just keep going. And then one day when I was pretty sure I'd gotten all of them out of me, I cleared out a room, moved all the furniture, and just laid them all on the ground. And then spent 5 hours just reorganizing them.
Putting them in different order.
In the order that ultimately became the first draft of the book.
How can coaches practice some of the things that you're talking about in Reasonable Hospitality? What can coaches do to make their clients feel special? Not just feel special, but to acknowledge that they actually are special.
Well, I think the first is a little philosophical, but I think it's important. One, recognizing what you're actually doing for a living. You can think, okay, I'm here to provide them whatever type of coaching. Or you can really think about it and understand, no, I'm actually here to set this person up for more success in their life. Because if you make them more successful in their business, that will inherently, more often than not, give them a better life as well.
Yeah.
I think when you understand that, when you really put the words that help you articulate why there's real importance in the work, it inherently makes you better at it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, when you realize that you're not just selling someone a service, but you're actually serving a person, it changes the way that you do the work. I believe, one, we talk about this all the time in my restaurants, be present with the people while you're with them, right?
You changed it at 11 Madison Park. You normally fine dining, you'd sort of have you describe the waiters sort of standing at attention off in the distance just a little bit, and you actually changed the way waiters interact with the table so that they could actually connect rather than serve and be gone.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, there's kind of three things that I always tell everyone: be present. Don't take yourself too seriously, and find one size fits one gestures to deliver to the people you're serving. And I'll contextualize those a little bit. Every year when I go to buy my wife a birthday present or a Christmas present, it's really hard, right? It's a very pressure-filled experience. Yeah. Until about 4 years ago, I stopped deciding what to get her when it was time to get her a gift, and the entire year was a fun and playful pursuit of the perfect gift. And so I have on my phone a notes app. It says Christina. Mm-hmm. And every time I hear her say something, I just write it down, something that could eventually be useful. What it does is two things. One, when it comes time, I have a whole year of stuff to reference. But two, on a grander scheme, it compels me to be more present when I'm with her the other 364 days of the year. And so, listen, if you're a coach, I don't know how long your time with a client is in any certain situation, but eventually it will come to an end. At that point, you have a choice to make. Is the relationship over, or are you going to do something to have the end of that actually perhaps give it the ability to continue. I'm a big believer in gifts, right? So if the day I start working with you, I'm pursuing you and I'm present enough with you such that when it comes time to give you a gift on our last day, I have the perfect gift. It means that I've been paying attention to you the entire time.
Yeah.
I've been taking notes. I'm going to give you something extraordinarily thoughtful at the end, which is going to result in you telling a bunch of people about me and thinking about me for a very long time. That's amazing. But what it also will have done is every time we're together, I'm not just going into the experience thinking I have a job to get done and when it's done, I'm going to leave. I'm also pursuing a relationship with you. That's what hospitality is. It's being creative and intentional in pursuit of relationships. And you can be a coach, go in, do your thing, and leave. Or you can develop like a real relationship with the person you're serving. Because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're serving people, and you just happen to be doing it through coaching.
One of the things that I think coaches struggle with is that they may feel a little bit like friends for money, you know, the sort of transactional nature of that. And you have, in the restaurant business, you sort of redeem that in some way. I mean, there's a point where you put the check down and people have to pay the check, and you're uncomfortable with those sort of transactions because, of course, you got to be profitable. You got to keep this thing going. You have to lay your people off, so you can't serve free food every night.
Yeah.
What did you do to sort of offset that transactional feel of this relational moment?
So, I mean, we've talked about this before. I think anything that's transactional, we have this flawed belief system that it has an inability to be hospitable. That once you start talking about money, it's only an opportunity to push people further away from one another and never an opportunity to bring them closer. At our restaurant, that was definitively the case. It was an expensive restaurant. At the end of the meal, I'm giving you a big check. But we decided to take that moment, not accept that it was an unfortunately necessary end of the meal, and embrace it as an opportunity. And so at the end of the meal, when we knew someone was done, we'd go over to their table with a bottle of cognac, a full bottle of cognac, a glass for each person at the table. We'd pour a little splash into each glass, and we'd say, hey, this is with our compliments. I'm going to leave the bottle here. Help yourself to as much as you'd like. And then we'd put the check down over here. We'd say, your check is here, ready whenever you're ready to go. What we did was a few things. One, no one ever had to ask for the check again. Two, no one could ever say we were trying to rush them out. We'd just given them an entire bottle of free booze.
You're inviting them to stay.
At the moment where we gave them a big check, we'd matched it with a moment of absurd generosity, which kept the value proposition intact. But perhaps my favorite, I always believe that a great restaurant experience is one that feels in some small way like you've been invited over to a friend's house for dinner. My favorite part when I have friends over to my house for dinner is that moment, you know this moment, when there's just a few people left and someone grabs that last half-empty bottle of wine and pours the remains into people's glasses. At the end of a night where we had waited on people's every need, we gave them the gift of being able to serve one another. Now, I've talked to people who dined with us then, and keep in mind, at that point, we were serving some of the best food on the planet, who don't remember a single thing they ate, but they remember how we made them feel with the gesture of that cognac. I believe if people feel the way that you just said they sometimes feel, don't lean away from those transactional moments, but lean into them and apply some creativity and intention to them and take something that might have been a negative before and make it one of the highlights of the relationship. I'll give you another example. A friend of mine who's a lawyer. You know, sometimes when you're working with a lawyer, every once in a while the bill gets really big. And we've been in this situation where you're just going about your day, doing your emails, and you open up an email from your lawyer, and it's a really big bill. He would do this. When he was going to send a client who he'd worked with for a long time a really big bill, he would just call them 10 minutes before and say, hey, I'm about to send you a really big bill. I don't want you to be surprised. We can talk about it later. I just didn't want it to like ruin your day and throw you off, and I just want to let you know that it's there. We can talk about it. I'm here. I appreciate you. Rather than just throw these things out, getting in front of them.
That softens the whole thing, doesn't it?
Right? And so I think the way we charge people is important. There's this rule called the peak end rule. Have you ever heard of this? It's this scientific breakdown of how people remember experiences. The only two things that matter are the peak and the end. Now, the peak is the furthest deviation from zero, for better or worse. I'm actually comforted by that because we all fall short, we mess up, right?
Yeah.
And what that shows me is no matter how badly you messed up, they won't remember that if your recovery is just a little further from zero than the mess up.
Right.
But the end actually gives me great excitement because in that I see an opportunity. Whether it's in making the payment something cool instead of something terrible, or recognizing that we get to define the end of an experience. So many people think in service industries that the moment someone pays, that that's the end. And it's hard for that to be great no matter how much creativity you put towards it. But you can decide that the end of the experience is actually 2 weeks later. It could be 3 weeks later. The end of the experience, if you're a coach, could be that moment where you look at your notes app and you study and I'm like, man, Don loves Reese's peanut butter cups. Or more realistically, Don loves cheeseburgers. And so
Both, actually.
I loved working with him. And I don't know if he's going to hire me again, but I just want to show some gratitude. And I'm going to send him 5 gift cards to the 5 places in Nashville that I think make the best cheeseburger. And every time he has one of them, he's going to think of me. And this is what I can promise you. If you ever need a coach again, you're going to call me. And even if you don't, you're going to tell that story a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Like through Unreasonable Hospitality, you can wake up one day and suddenly find you have legions of ambassadors out there singing your praises. And yes, this stuff does cost money, but it doesn't need to cost a lot. And even when it does, I've found that any investment I've ever made in Unreasonable Hospitality has much more impact than any investment I ever made in traditional marketing.
Wow. I mean, coaches, they're in the business of changing lives. And I don't know that there are very many coaches that actually understand how powerful their words are. There's a point in almost every movie, there are these two characters, the guide and the hero. The guide is Mr. Miyagi, the hero is Daniel,
Yes.
the guide is Yoda, the hero is Luke Skywalker, so on and so on. It's almost every single movie. And there's usually a point at the end of the movie, I'm thinking of King's Speech, for example, where Daniel, the drama teacher, goes back after King George has delivered the speech without stuttering, which is the climactic scene.
Yeah,
of the film.
I remember.
But it's a very important scene in the movie where the guide actually goes back and looks at the hero and says, "You are different." And to me, that always illustrates this point that people are actually not capable of looking in the mirror and saying, "I am different." It has to come from outside of you, which speaks to the sort of it can help you to look at yourself and say, "Hey, you're doing a good job." But there's something about a coach, an authoritative figure in your life saying you are not the same. And one of the things I love doing in coaching relationships is there's a watch that you can get for $100. It's the only watch Sid Mashburn sells in his shop. You know, Sid Mashburn is a closer, unbelievable. But he won't sell a Rolex or anything. He sells a $100 Timex watch that looks like the watch your grandfather went to war with, right?
Exactly.
You know, it's a very great watch. But $100 and then a letter just saying, "Hey, every time you wear this watch, I want you to know you are capable of X."
Embrace the impact you have on people's lives beyond just the product you're selling them. I think it's recognizing that anything that feels transactional is actually an opportunity to develop a greater sense of connection. It's recognizing the fact that you get to determine when the experience is over. It's not over when it's officially over. You can extend it as long as you'd like, so long as you're willing to just keep on caring. And it's recognizing that success in business comes when you make the choice to pursue relationships. You may be in the service industry, you can make the choice to be in the hospitality industry, but we are all in the relationship business. And if that's the case, be as unreasonable in your pursuit of relationships as you are anything else that you're passionate about. And if you do those 4 things, I think it can become pretty transformational.
Yeah. Well, super helpful. Thank you for speaking to coaches today.
Thanks, bud.
All right. If you haven't read the book, make sure to grab the book as soon as you can. Best book I've read in 5 years.
Dude.
Easily.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't say that lightly.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people who have read their books are watching this.
Sorry.
Great job, Will. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.